The performance monitor you can find on your client or server. Now, I'm actually going to pull that up, not on my host machine, but I'm going to connect to RTS DC1 because there are some unique things depending on what roles you have installed. And I'm going to close some of these windows I have open here. On my domain controller, I'm just going to go to Tools, and Performance Monitor is in the list. Now, usually I just go to Search and type Performance and it shows up. This is going to look the same on Windows 10 as it does on Server 2019. If you go to Performance Monitor, I get this graph. Right now, it's only looking at percent processor time. Now, this is real-time monitoring, but what I can do is right-click and add counters. When I do that, it gives us a long list, thousands of counters. Now, how we get to thousands of counters, if I expand processor, each of these is an individual counter just for the processor. So that's a lot. If we go to memory, when I expand memory, I've counted them. There's actually 35 individual counters for memory. Now, some of these counters have a lot of overlap, like available bytes, available kilobytes, available megabytes. That's just different, output, whether you want to see it in, KB or MB. So a lot of overlap like that in some of these counters. Now, with a lot of these, like demand 0 faults per second, there is a show description for each of these counters. Now, sometimes the description leaves a bit to be desired, but at the bottom here, they'll give you a description that'll just give you insight into what the counter does. Now, we don't care about that counter specifically, but one of the concerns when you monitor anything is that if you monitor the wrong setting, you get a number from the wrong setting, and then you take some action or inaction based on that number, that may not end very well. So we want to make sure we completely understand exactly what the counters we select are actually doing. So that's helpful, but you may still end up on the Microsoft site so you can get a more detailed view. Now, to look at just some of the things that are possible, I'm going to go to the top here, and we'll just start scrolling down a little slower. We talked about DFS namespace, DFS replication. I have counters for both of those. So for DFS namespace, you could monitor folders. You can monitor anything related to replication for DFS. If I look in directory services, that is Active Directory, directory service. We have many counters, probably more than 100. If we keep scrolling, I can look at information related to Active Directory replication between sites or within the same site. I can monitor how much is compressed, how much is uncompressed. You'll see the not compressed within a site or between sites. But if we keep scrolling and keep scrolling and keep scrolling, and again, this is just Active Directory counters. If I wanted to monitor successful user creations, there's a counter for that. I could have this counter run and it would tell me X amount of users were successfully created. If I wanted to monitor how many passwords have been changed, if I wanted to monitor how many groups have been created, how many computers have been created, would be the machine creation attempt. So incredibly detailed. And notice for some of these, like there is SAM, which stands for Security Account Manager, successful user creation. Then there's SAM user creation. This would be for success and failed. If you didn't have the rights to create a user account and you tried anyway, this counter would track that, where this would only track successful. So very detailed, but everything here is real time. So if you select any of these counters, if you are not looking at this screen, there's no way to retroactively go back and see that it actually happened. So with this, if you want to have this logged, you would go to Data Collector Sets. With the Data Collector Set, you can actually create a new data collector set. And I'm just going to choose to create one manually. And I'm just going to call it logged monitoring. And I'll say next for that. I'm going to choose a performance counter. Now I know the view is kind of small. It's just the way it comes up here. But I'm going to add a performance counter. And I'm going to say processor. Percent processor time. That is just the percent of time your processor is actually being utilized. So if I really want to know my CPU usage, that's the counter you would choose. So I'm going to click OK for that. And I'm going to go to next. And what it's going to do is write this to a log file. So that's system drive, that's like my C Windows, to this perf log. So it's actually going to generate a file. And I can finish that. Now, if I go back to this logged monitoring, that's what I named it. I'm just going to right click that and go to properties. If I go to the directory tab, that's the path it's going to save the file to. If I go to schedule, I can determine when this actually starts and stops. So let's say I'm going to monitor the CPU usage. That's the counter I selected. I can go to add, and I can say I want this to start April 10th. I want it to expire, I don't know, May 10th. If you wanted to pick a certain time, or you could say it never expires. It's going to run until I come back here and tell it not to run. And maybe I want this to run at 8 a.m. Maybe between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. is the busiest time on our network, and that's when I want this to run. So I'll say start at 8 a.m. And we don't work Saturday and Sunday in our environment, we'll say. So I'm going to clear those. And it's been decided I don't need to have this run 5 days a week. We are just going to have this run 2 days a week. So I'm going to clear Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So only Tuesday and Thursday at 8 a.m. will this write to that log file CPU usage for this system I'm on. Well, I'm going to click OK there. Now, I said I wanted this to run between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. If you go to the stop condition, this is what dictates when it actually stops. So 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. is just 2 hours. So under units, I would just choose 2 hours. Now you could do this in days, weeks, just depending on what the counter itself actually does. But I'll just say 2 hours. Now, indefinitely, every Tuesday and Thursday, this is actually going to run. So pretty fascinating overall. I can just apply that. Now, these are two separate tools. We are in the Performance Console, but the Performance Monitor is a real-time monitoring tool. Data Collector Sets, even though it's in the Performance Console, is really a separate tool. Same counters, but it is for logged monitoring, writes to a file, so you could go back and examine that file. Now, the thing they all have in common, this is only for monitoring the server you're on, the local server. So if you have 10 servers, you would have to configure this on each of those servers independent of the others. So just a local monitoring tool. But that's our look at the Performance Monitor and Data Collector Set.